I had always hated the sound of the basement door. It creaked, whining like it resented being disturbed, and yet, somehow, I had grown blind to it, or maybe just indifferent. Until tonight. Tonight, I noticed it again, half hidden behind the stack of cardboard boxes, the latch slightly askew. My pulse jumped, a cold prickle sliding down my spine. That door had never been left like this before. I hovered at the top of the stairs, listening. Silence, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. My husband, Dan, had been working late. He said he had a big project, but a nagging curiosity tugged at me. Something in his tone had shifted over the past week. Too clipped, too rehearsed. And now this door. Something didn't fit. I crept down the stairs, each step deliberate, trying to swallow the wave of dread tightening around my chest. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something else, an unfamiliar sweetness, almost like wax. I reached the bottom, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Normally, I would have turned away, laughed at myself for being paranoid. But tonight, I felt a crack of daring, something sharp and unrelenting inside me. The door swung open with a hesitant push, and the first thing I noticed was a faint light spilling from the cracks. A whisper of movement, too deliberate, too human, skittered through the narrow beam. And then I saw him. Not Dan. A boy, maybe 10, crouched behind a makeshift partition, eyes wide, frozen in panic. And then a girl, barely 7, clutching a threadbare doll, her lips trembling. They looked at me like I was a ghost. My stomach turned over. I backed up instinctively, the door slamming shut behind me with a thud that echoed like a verdict. Dan's voice cut through the tension like a knife. What? What are you doing down there? His words were calm, too calm, and I realized with a sick twist that he had been watching me come down the stairs. I swallowed hard. I heard the door, I said, voice shakier than I wanted. My eyes darted to the children. Who? Who are they? They're nothing, Dan said, stepping into view, his face carefully neutral. But there was a flicker in his eyes, panic, maybe anger, or maybe just the fear of being caught. I can explain. Explain what? My voice rose without me realizing. That you've been keeping kids in our basement? Dan took a step closer, hands raised slightly. But I could see the muscle memory in his posture, the way he'd always manipulated situations before. Listen, it's complicated. Complicated? You call locking children in our basement complicated? I swallowed bile. My mind raced, trying to process every second, every movement. The boy clutched his sister's hand, looking between us like we were the threat. And maybe we were. Dan glanced toward them, then back at me. I didn't look. I didn't want you to find out like this. His voice was calm, but something brittle ran beneath it. I took a deliberate step toward him. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with a cold, methodical calculation. Then tell me, now, because if you don't, I'll... My voice faltered, the weight of my own thoughts pressing down. I didn't know if I could live with what I might do next. The children flinched. I noticed details I hadn't before, the way the girl's hair had been braided too tightly, the dirt under their nails, the faint bruises on the boy's wrist. I realized, with a tightening in my chest, that their fear was not just of me. It was of him. Dan's eyes darted to the basement light, then back to me. I made a mistake, he said, voice low, almost pleading. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could. But he never finished. My hands curled into fists, knuckles white, and I felt a strange surge of power and rage mingled with horror. I wasn't sure if I could forgive him, or if I even wanted to. The children's eyes followed me, desperate, questioning, searching for a hint of safety. I backed up slowly, giving myself space to think, every instinct screaming at me that this was bigger than any confrontation I had ever imagined. And then I saw it, a trapdoor beneath the oldest cardboard boxes, one I had passed hundreds of times without noticing. The edges of it were worn, the hinges greased, and it opened onto something else. Something deeper, colder. Dan noticed me studying it. His face went pale, just for a fraction of a second. Don't, he said. I hesitated. One choice could destroy everything, or maybe save them. My mind raced. Call the police, confront him here, escape with the kids. But each option carried a risk I could barely calculate, and one wrong move would be catastrophic. The children huddled closer together, and I realized the weight of the decision was mine, and mine alone. I stepped toward the trapdoor. Dan moved in front of it. Wait, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I swallowed, my heart hammering, and reached for the handle. And that's when the basement lights flickered, plunging us into half shadow, half light. And I saw movement behind the partition, another shadow. Not a child. Something else. I froze. And in that pause, I understood. Opening this door could change everything. Or end everything. What is the shadow behind the partition? And how will she act now that the truth has layers she hasn't yet imagined? The flicker of the basement light made the shadows dance across the walls. But there was no mistaking it now. Behind the cardboard partition, something moved, a slow, deliberate shift too large to be a child. My stomach twisted, a cold knot tightening as adrenaline sharpened every sense. Dan took a cautious step toward me, his hands raised like he was trying to calm a storm. It's nothing. Just the boiler? His words faltered. The way he avoided looking at the shadow told me everything I needed to know. He was lying. I clenched my jaw. Don't lie to me. My voice was quieter than I expected, almost steady, but every syllable carried ice. The children pressed closer, their small bodies trembling against mine, silent pleas etched across their faces. The boy's fingers dug into his sister's arm, a futile attempt to anchor himself. I felt the weight of responsibility press down on me like a physical force. The shadows shifted again, and I caught a glimpse of a man's silhouette, crouched, almost blending into the darkness. My mind raced. Another family? An accomplice? Or, God help me, another layer of deception I wasn't ready to face? Dan's face paled under the dim light. It's fine, you don't need to see. I stepped toward the trapdoor again, ignoring his protest. Tell me what's down there, I said, my voice calm but sharp, like steel wrapped in velvet. Everything. Right now. He hesitated, glancing at the children. The tension was taut, a wire stretched to breaking point. Kent, he said finally, his tone cracking. Not yet. If you knew, you'd never forgive me. My pulse jumped, but instead of backing down, I leaned closer, lowering my voice so the children couldn't hear. Try me. His shoulders sagged, the mask of control slipping. There's another family, he whispered. I didn't plan for it to.get like this. His eyes darted to the shadow, then back to me. I thought I could keep it contained. Just temporarily. My mind spun, forcing itself to grasp the full scope. Another family? Hidden here? In our basement? The reality pressed against me with a brutal clarity. I felt something inside me fracture, rage, fear, disbelief, but also a cold, calculating spark. If I wanted to survive this, to protect the children, I had to think faster than he did. I glanced at the kids. Their trust, fragile as it was, rested on me. If I froze, if I let fear dictate my actions, we were all trapped, literally and figuratively. And yet, opening the trapdoor without understanding what waited below could be catastrophic. Dan, I said slowly, each word deliberate, if anyone gets hurt because of this, you're done. Understand? He nodded, swallowing hard. There was a tremor in his jaw, a silent admission of guilt. That even as I saw the fear, a darker question gnawed at me. How far had this gone? How long had he been hiding people here? And what had I missed? The shadow moved again, this time more decisively. My eyes adjusted. Two men, tall, their faces obscured by darkness. They were crouched, tense, watching us. My stomach dropped. They weren't children. And now, the basement wasn't just a prison, it was a trap. The boy whimpered, breaking the silence. I pulled him close, pressing a hand to his mouth to muffle the sound, while the girl's eyes searched mine for assurance. I had none to give. My mind raced. Negotiate? Fight? Call the police? Every option carried risk, and Dan was no longer an ally. Move away from them, I said to Dan, my voice even but commanding. He hesitated, then obeyed. I felt the strange, intoxicating surge of authority that came from making a choice when stakes were life or death. My pulse steadied, thoughts sharpening. One of the men shifted, revealing a faint glint, metal, perhaps a tool or a weapon. My chest tightened. This was no longer a confrontation about hidden children. It was about control, survival, and trust fractured beyond repair. I had to act. Slowly, I crouched near the trapdoor, my hands brushing the worn wood. I needed a plan, any plan, but my mind refused to panic. Panic would get us killed. I counted the shadows, the distances, the obstacles. Every detail mattered. Dan's lips moved, but he no longer seemed to be speaking to me. The shadowed men exchanged a look I couldn't see, then shifted again, moving silently behind the partition. My stomach churned with fear, and with a cold calculation that surprised me. I glanced at the children, then back at the trapdoor. One decision could tip everything. Open it, and I might find the truth, or plunge us into something far worse. Stay, and I might forfeit any chance to protect them. My hand hovered over the handle, and then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement from the stairs above. The front door of the house had opened. Someone was coming in. Who is entering the house, and how will her split-second choice at the trapdoor impact everything already in motion? The sound of the front door echoed through the house like a gunshot. My heart lurched, not with fear of the person arriving, but at the collision of two worlds I had no control over: the hidden basement and the reality above it. The shadowed men shifted, tense, ears pricked toward the sound. The children froze, small bodies rigid against mine, eyes wide. Dan cursed under his breath, stepping closer to the trapdoor, his posture a mixture of fear and irritation. "It's just a neighbor," he muttered, though his voice betrayed doubt. He wasn't trying to reassure me. He was trying to convince himself. I peered toward the top of the stairs, every sense straining. I had no idea who it was, and that uncertainty was a weapon. Whoever this was, they were about to walk into a house that contained secrets darker than anyone could imagine. And for the first time, I realized I had a chance, not just to protect the children, but to gain leverage over Dan, over the situation. "Go upstairs," I said quietly to the kids. The boy hesitated, eyes flicking to me, but I nodded sharply. Slowly, they obeyed, trusting me in a way that made my chest tighten. Protecting them wasn't just instinct anymore. It was strategy. Dan's jaw tightened. "You can't," I said now. I stepped closer, eyes locked on his, and something in my tone left no room for argument. He froze, then backed away. I felt a subtle, intoxicating shift. The first tremor of control. The front door creaked fully open. A woman's voice called out, cheerful but faintly strained. "Hello? Dan? Are you home?" Dan froze, caught between the basement and the arrival. The shadowed men behind the partition tense, silent and immobile. "Stay hidden," I hissed, though my mind raced. I had seconds to act. I needed a narrative, something plausible if we were discovered, something that didn't betray what was below. I turned to Dan. "You're going upstairs. Now, I'll handle this." "What?" I said now. My eyes narrowed. For the first time, I wasn't negotiating. I was dictating. He glanced at the children, then back at me, and finally nodded, slinking toward the stairs. The moment he was gone, I pressed myself against the trapdoor, my hand brushing the cool, worn wood. The shadowed men were frozen, watching, waiting. Their patience was mechanical, disciplined. I had to be faster. The visitors' steps drew closer to the living room. My pulse thrummed in my ears. I counted, every second stretched, each a measure of life or death. Then I heard the woman's voice again, louder, more insistent. "Dan? Are you serious?" The door was locked. "Why didn't you answer?" I took a deep breath, forcing my voice calm, even warm. "He's not home," I called out, stepping into the faint light of the hallway. "Can I help you?" There was a pause. The sound of her footsteps shifted slightly, cautious now. "Oh, I just came by to drop off something. Didn't want to leave it at the door." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral, disarming. The children, the shadowed men, Dan's hidden panic, all of it pressed into a single point of focus. I could feel the power in my hands now, in how I controlled what was seen and unseen. "Just leave it on the counter," I said smoothly, stepping aside. The visitor obeyed, unaware of the storm brewing below. The footsteps receded, then the door closed softly. Silence reclaimed the house, but it was different now, heavier, more charged. I exhaled, forcing my pulse to slow. Then I heard the softest shift behind the partition. One of the men was moving closer to the trapdoor. My heart skipped. I realized that if I misjudged him, all control would evaporate instantly. I crouched, hand on the wood, eyes fixed on the shadow. "Listen carefully," I whispered. "No one moves unless I say, 'Understand?'" A faint nod. That was all I needed. Fear and respect mingled in the gesture, and it made a strange, cold part of me smile. I backed away slightly, weighing options. I could open the trapdoor, risk a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. Or I could negotiate, delay, manipulate. Each choice carried weight. Each choice could end lives. Dan returned from the stairs, his face pale. "She's gone," he said, a voice tight. I didn't answer. My mind was spinning through possibilities, calculating risks, mapping moves. And then I saw it, a detail I hadn't noticed before. On the wall above the trapdoor, faint scratches, almost invisible. They formed a pattern, deliberate. Someone had marked time or left a message. My pulse jumped. These weren't just hidden people. They were organized, anticipating discovery, leaving breadcrumbs. I swallowed, the gravity of it sinking in. I wasn't just dealing with children or even Dan's lies. I was dealing with a network of secrets that extended beyond my comprehension. The shadow shifted again, closer now. I could feel its presence, tense and deliberate. My hand hovered over the trapdoor handle. My next move would determine everything: the children's safety, my own survival, the exposure of Dan's betrayal. I had a choice: act now or wait and risk losing control. I exhaled slowly. "Open it," I said, voice firm. "All of you, come up and talk." Slowly, and no sudden moves. The basement fell silent. Then, from the shadows, the first man stepped into the dim light. His face was obscured, but his eyes met mine. And in that instant, I understood. I wasn't just confronting hidden families or a deceitful husband. I was facing consequences I hadn't yet imagined. Who exactly is stepping forward from the shadows, and what will she demand or risk once the truth begins to unfold? The man stepped fully into the dim light, revealing a face sharp and wary, eyes like twin searchlights measuring every movement. His companion followed, slow, deliberate, exuding the same calculated patience. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I forced my breath to steady. Panic wouldn't save anyone tonight. Not me, not the children. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my tone calm, deliberate. I crouched slightly, hands visible but ready, reading every twitch, every shadowed motion. The first man's lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't know him," he said finally, voice low, "or the trouble he's caused." His gaze flicked toward Dan, who remained frozen a few steps behind me. "But you will." I frowned. The implication was clear. This wasn't just a basement full of children. It was bigger, and Dan had underestimated it. I felt a surge of anger, and beneath it, a sharper edge of calculation. Dan wasn't just lying to me. He was trapped, and so was I, but for the first time, I understood the pieces of the board, and that knowledge was power. I glanced at the children, huddled silently behind me, and my decision hardened. Protecting them was priority one, but leverage was priority two. Everything else could be manipulated. "Look," I said slowly, each word measured, "I don't know what you think you're doing here, but these kids are under my protection now. So whatever trouble exists, it ends with me. No one gets hurt." The second man tilted his head, studying me. "You think you can dictate terms?" His voice was incredulous, almost amused. But I noticed a flicker of caution in his posture, a hesitation that told me he hadn't expected a woman to stand like this, commanding presence despite the chaos. "I don't think," I said evenly. "I know, and you'll find it faster to cooperate than resist." Dan's voice broke the silence. "You don't understand. They." I turned sharply on him, eyes narrowed. "I understand more than you know. Now shut up." The first man exhaled, a slow puff of air, and glanced at his companion. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a warning, a calculation I didn't fully see but felt deep in my chest. The basement air thickened, charged with tension. "Fine," the first man said finally. "You want answers, but you'll get only part of the truth. Then you'll decide what to do next." He stepped closer, and I noticed scars along his forearms, faint but deliberate, evidence of past struggle, past survival. He was dangerous, but not reckless. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "Start talking." "I'm listening." He paused, glancing at the trapdoor. "Down there," he said, voice low. "More of them. You didn't know. And that was smart. But now the risk is higher. Every choice you make from here, every single one, affects all of them, including those kids." My stomach twisted. The weight of responsibility crashed over me, mingling with the cold thrill of strategy. I had to keep my wits sharp, to read every gesture, anticipate every move. One mistake, and the basement wouldn't just be a secret. It would be a tomb. Dan shifted again, lips trembling. "Please, don't involve them," he whispered, almost to himself. I ignored him, focusing on the men. Tell me what you want. My tone brooked no delay, no deception. I needed clarity. I needed control. The second man's eyes flicked to the children, lingering longer than necessary. Control? He said finally. You want control. You don't know the half of it. I felt a chill, the kind that slides under your skin and settles in your chest. But I refused to let it paralyze me. I was scared, of course I was. But there was a sharper edge now. Calculation, strategy. I needed to see every piece, understand every threat. Fear alone would get us killed. Then show me, I said, voice firm, step by step, and don't lie. The first man nodded once, almost imperceptibly. You'll get the story, but what you do with it, that's your choice. And make no mistake, the wrong choice will cost more than just secrets. I swallowed, my pulse steadying. My eyes flicked to the trapdoor, to the children, to Dan. The room felt smaller, tighter, every shadow a possible danger, every movement weighted with consequence. I had crossed the first line. I had taken control of my fear. Now I had to navigate the labyrinth Dan had built, a maze of lies, hidden lives, and consequences far beyond anything I could have imagined. And yet, as I crouched there, hand brushing the worn wood of the trapdoor, I understood something crucial. The power wasn't in knowing everything. The power was in how I chose to act with what I already knew. I took a breath, the basement air thick and tense. Show me, I said again. And don't waste time. The first man glanced at the second. Then, together, they stepped toward the trapdoor. And that's when I noticed it. A faint scraping sound beneath the boards, deliberate, patient, almost like a warning. Someone, or something, was waiting below. I froze. The decision was mine. Open the trapdoor or risk losing control forever. What lies beneath the trapdoor? And how will her first tactical move define the boundaries between survival, morality, and revenge? My hand hovered over the trapdoor handle, the worn wood cool beneath my fingers. The children behind me clung together, silent, wide-eyed, trusting me to decide for them. Dan stayed frozen a few feet back, pale, like a man who had just realized the depth of his own lies. The two men in the shadows watched me with sharp, unreadable expressions. Every heartbeat stretched longer, each one loaded with consequence. I took a deep breath, steadying the surge of adrenaline. One mistake now would ruin everything. But hesitation could be just as deadly. I pulled the trapdoor open. A musty, colder air seeped out, carrying faint murmurs and the metallic tang of something I didn't want to name. The boards creaked under my weight, but nothing collapsed. I leaned over, peering into the darkness. There, huddled in a tighter circle than I'd imagined, were three more children. Younger, scared, their faces streaked with dirt and faint bruises. Behind them, a narrow corridor led further down, beyond the reach of the weak light above. The first man stepped closer, whispering, "They've been here longer than you know. The ones above. Your husband thinks he controls them, but he doesn't. He's been just a caretaker, a small piece of a much larger plan." I swallowed, the weight of it pressing down like iron. My mind raced. Dan, my husband, had been keeping secrets. But this was a network, something bigger than a simple betrayal. The children above were only the surface. And my moral compass twisted in knots. Protect, expose, survive, all of it tangled in a single decision. I crouched, trying to make eye contact with the kids below. Their fear mirrored the other children's. Yet there was also recognition, hope, desperation. I didn't have time to parse it fully. I had to act. Come up slowly, I said, voice firm but gentle, aware that panic could trigger chaos. One by one, the children climbed the ladder into the dim light above, trembling, whispering questions I didn't answer. My hands remained ready, my eyes scanning the shadows for movement. Dan stepped forward, voice shaking. This isn't what it looks like. I cut him off, sharper than before. I know exactly what it looks like. And now, you're going to tell me everything, or I swear. My voice faltered for only a second before I regained control. Threats weren't enough. I needed leverage, understanding, clarity. The first man watched silently, arms crossed. You have 20 seconds to convince him to speak, or the kids move, and the plan changes. Forever. I nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement. The countdown began, not in time, but in the weight of consequence. Dan's lips trembled. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I thought I could manage. Just a temporary arrangement. His words stumbled over themselves, revealing the depth of his panic. Temporary? I repeated, voice flat, doubly precise. You call locking children in a basement temporary? My mind raced, trying to calculate my next move. Every word, every pause, every glance had to serve purpose. I needed him aligned with me, even if only by fear. The second man stepped forward, motioning toward the corridor beyond. There are more, some older, some more dangerous. You've seen the surface, but that's not all. If you want these kids safe, your husband's cooperation is mandatory. I turned my gaze on Dan, measuring, testing. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked between the children and me. I saw the moment his will bent. Not completely, but enough that I could work with it. Listen carefully, I said, voice low but steady. If you want anyone to survive this, children, yourself, you will answer my questions truthfully. No more lies. Everything you hide will cost someone dearly. His eyes widened, the fear sharp, raw. He nodded once, sharply. The shadowed men exchanged glances, then stepped aside slightly, giving me space. I realized, with a strange thrill, that I had taken the first real control in this twisted game. But the weight of it pressed on me. One misstep, and every child, every secret, could explode in ruin. A faint sound echoed from the corridor below, metal scraping against concrete. Not a child. Not a toy. Something else was coming. I froze, my hand inching toward the children, my mind racing through contingencies. Open the corridor fully and risk confrontation? Wait and risk being overrun? I swallowed hard, forcing calm. Stay close, I whispered to the kids. And follow my lead. The shadow from below stepped into view. A figure taller than the men above, slower, deliberate, silent. The children trembled. I realized then, with a cold certainty, that nothing in my past had prepared me for this. Not betrayal, not fear, not even cunning. This was a new level. And yet, in that instant, I understood something critical. Survival now depended on a single truth. Knowing the rules of this hidden world and bending them, carefully, strategically, before anyone else could. I took a step forward. Who, or what, is emerging from the lower corridor? And how will her first true test of cunning and moral resolve shape the confrontation? The figure emerged fully from the lower corridor, tall, deliberate, and unnervingly still. Shadows clung to him like a second skin, his eyes fixed on me with a calm that screamed of experience. Not a child. Not a casual intruder. Something older, sharper, a predator disguised in patience. The children pressed against me instinctively, their small bodies trembling. I felt the weight of responsibility crash down. Every decision now carried irreversible consequence. I swallowed hard, forcing my fear into a tight coil at the base of my chest. Panic would get us killed. Calculation might save us. Dan took a hesitant step forward, voice weak. He's not. He's dangerous. I cut him off sharply. I know. Stay silent, or you'll make it worse. The tall figure shifted slightly, a slow movement that hinted at power, control, and patience honed over years of careful survival. You shouldn't be here, he said finally, voice low, controlled. But now that you are, you're going to make a choice. I squared my shoulders, forcing calm into my tone. I've already made choices. I intend to make more. Tell me what I need to know. He studied me for a long moment, assessing, weighing, calculating. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. There are rules here. The basement isn't just a hiding place, it's a structure, a network. Every person, every child, every arrangement has a purpose. Your husband has been sloppy. That's why you're here. I felt the words sink in, cold and sharp. A network. Dan wasn't just hiding children. He was part of something far larger. My anger spiked, but it was tempered by necessity. I had to manipulate the situation carefully, extract what I needed without triggering chaos. Then show me, I said evenly, voice calm. I need to understand it all now. The figure nodded again, stepping closer, but keeping just enough distance that I could feel the weight of his presence without being physically threatened. Follow me, he said, and keep your eyes open. One wrong move, and the consequences are irreversible. I glanced at the children. Their wide, trusting eyes pinned me to a course of action. I swallowed, the cold thrill of control mingling with fear. This was no longer about discovery. It was about survival, strategy, and leverage. Dan lingered behind, pale, shaky. The shadowed men flanking him were tense, waiting, testing, silent. I realized with a grim clarity that everyone in the room was holding their breath, anticipating a misstep. The tall figure led me down the narrow corridor, past the huddled children who were trembling in anticipation. The faint, musty smell of damp wood mixed with an almost imperceptible metallic tang, evidence of life lived here in secrecy, in isolation. I noted every detail. Worn boards, faint scratches, subtle signs of time. Each clue was a piece of the network I had to decode to survive. This way, he whispered, voice barely audible, as if the walls themselves could betray us. We reached a small room at the end of the corridor, faint light spilling from a bare bulb. Inside, a young boy and girl, older than the others, sat in tense silence. Their eyes widened when they saw me, a mixture of hope, fear, and recognition. I felt the weight of their gaze settle on me. You see now, the figure said, voice low, almost reverent. This isn't random. It's structure. Chaos comes from mistakes, and your husband has made many. I studied him, my mind spinning, calculating, absorbing every piece of information while keeping a calm facade. My eyes flicked to the children, then to Dan, then back to the figure. This was a chessboard. Every movement mattered. I need leverage, I said finally, voice steady. If I'm going to protect these children, I need to know the rules and the threats. Start talking. The figure studied me silently, then nodded. Fine, but know this. Understanding the rules doesn't guarantee safety. Only cunning, decisiveness, and ruthlessness do. And sometimes, not even that. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced a small, deliberate smile. I had faced fear before. I had faced betrayal. Now I faced something more dangerous. A system I had never imagined, with players who had spent years perfecting deception. And I knew, in that moment, that my next move would define everything. Protect the children, control the chaos, and navigate the web of lies Dan had created, or fail spectacularly. The figure stepped back, signaling that the time for hesitation was over. I swallowed hard. The children huddled closer. My hand brushed the worn wood of the trapdoor, my mind racing. And then I heard it, a sound from deeper in the corridor, deliberate, slow, almost patient. Something, or someone, was waiting. I froze. My choice was clear. Step forward and confront it, or wait and risk losing control entirely. What lies deeper in the corridor? And will her strategic instincts be enough to survive the next revelation? The scraping sound grew louder, deliberate, methodical. My heart hammered, but my mind sharpened. Every step, every breath, every shadow demanded focus. The children pressed close, silent, trusting me in a way that terrified me. One wrong move and they, and I, could all be destroyed. From the darkness emerged a figure taller than the men above, cloaked in shadows that seemed to cling unnaturally. Its face was obscured, features hidden, but I could feel its eyes, sharp, assessing, predatory. A chill slithered down my spine. Dan took a step forward, hands raised weakly. I don't. I cut him off with a sharp gesture. Stay quiet, or you make it worse. My voice was calm, but the steel beneath it left no room for argument. The figure moved closer, slow and deliberate, the scrape of boots against concrete the only sound. My pulse thudded, but I forced a deep, steadying breath. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Calculation, strategy, moral clarity, that was my arsenal now. You shouldn't be here, the figure said finally, voice low, controlled, echoing slightly in the narrow corridor. But since you are, everything changes. One wrong step, and this house becomes a tomb. I squared my shoulders. I'm here to protect the children, and to make sure the truth comes out. I need to know, who are you, what is this, and why are they here? The figure paused, as if weighing my words. Then it motioned to the older children huddled against the wall. They are not just victims. They are part of a structure your husband has disrupted. He was never the master here, only a caretaker of chaos. And you've stepped into a game far larger than you realize. I clenched my jaw, forcing my fear into focus. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just secrecy. It was a system, hidden and complex, and I had just walked into its center. I could feel the pressure, the stakes crushing down, but the cold spark of calculation ignited inside me. Then tell me what I need to do, I said, voice firm, measured. No games, no lies. One wrong move, and the children pay. The figure studied me, silent. The pause stretched like taut wire. Then it nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. You will have instructions. But every choice is yours, and every choice carries cost. Fail, even slightly, and all of you pay. I swallowed, chest tight. I glanced at Dan, whose face was pale, lips trembling. He had underestimated everything. He was powerless now. The children's eyes were on me, desperate, seeking guidance, protection. I realized then the true weight of control. It wasn't just about survival. It was about moral calculation, strategy, manipulation, and courage, all intertwined. One wrong choice, and the basement, the house, and every child in it could be lost. The shadowed figure stepped back, signaling that the confrontation had ended, for now. But the sense of threat remained palpable, thick in the air like smoke. I had seen only the tip of the network, only the surface of deception. Below, deeper still, more weighted. I pressed a hand to the trapdoor, feeling the cold, worn wood beneath my fingers. Every instinct screamed that opening it fully would escalate everything. But inaction carried risk too. The children were counting on me. I exhaled slowly, mind racing through contingencies. Protect them. Extract truth. Gain leverage. Survive. Then came the faintest movement behind the shadowed men. Dan had shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, his fear tangible. I realized with grim clarity that the moral weight of this situation wasn't just on me, it was on everyone. And the first truly dangerous choice of my own making was waiting. I looked down the corridor, eyes narrowing. My next move would define everything: survival, power, morality, and the fragile trust of the children. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. What lies deeper in the basement? And how far will she go to protect the children while confronting the expanding network of secrets? The trapdoor groaned under my weight as I eased it fully open, the narrow wooden ladder descending into darkness that smelled of damp concrete and fear. The children huddled behind me, silent but alert. Their eyes, wide and trusting, pinned me to a course of action I could not waver from. One misstep now, and everything would collapse. The shadowed men above stayed back, tense but silent, leaving me with the corridor below and the unknown waiting in its depths. The tall figure's words echoed in my mind. Every choice carries cost. Fail even slightly, and all of you pay. I climbed down slowly, hand over hand, eyes adjusting to the dim glow of flickering bulbs set along the walls. At the bottom, the narrow corridor opened into a larger room, an improvised holding area. Faint movements stirred from the shadows. I could hear quiet whispers, the rustle of clothing, the soft shuffle of feet. And then I saw them, older children, adolescents, wary, hardened by months, maybe years of confinement. Their faces were etched with survival, distrust, and a hint of recognition. I felt a pang of guilt, tempered immediately by the cold edge of calculation. Protecting them, controlling the narrative, gaining leverage. Everything now depended on my ability to read the room and act without hesitation. The tall figure stepped forward, motion deliberate, his presence commanding yet not overtly threatening. "They are not just captives," he said. "They are witnesses, enforcers, and participants in a system your husband disrupted. You think you hold control, but the rules run deeper than you understand." I nodded, swallowing the surge of fear that threatened to paralyze me. "Then teach me the rules," I said evenly, voice steady. "I need to know everything to protect these kids and survive myself." The figure paused, scanning the room, his eyes lingering on the older children. "You will learn, but every lesson comes at a risk. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it becomes, not just physically, but morally. Every decision is a testament." I glanced at the children huddled behind me, their trust tangible. My hands tightened into fists, my mind spinning through contingencies. Protect them. Understand the network. Gain leverage over Dan and the shadowed men. Every second counted, every move critical. From deeper in the shadows, a low, deliberate sound, metal scraping against concrete, echoed through the room. The older children froze, eyes darting toward the noise. I realized with a cold clarity that someone else, or something else, was waiting, watching, testing. I exhaled slowly, forcing calm. "Step forward," I said quietly, my voice carrying authority I hadn't fully felt until now. "I'm not here to harm anyone, but I will if I have to. Show yourself." A figure emerged, taller than the rest, shoulders broad, movements controlled. Their face remained obscured, but I could feel their eyes, sharp and deliberate, assessing me, measuring my resolve. My pulse thumped, but I refused to let fear dictate my actions. "Every choice has consequences," the figure said, voice low, deliberate. And you've already made one by coming down here. Now the test begins. How far will you go to protect the children? To maintain control? To survive? I swallowed, the weight of the situation pressing down. My mind raced, calculating, anticipating. One wrong decision, one misread gesture, could unravel everything. But a sharper thought emerged, cold and clear. I had agency here. Strategy, cunning, and calculated risk were mine. I could navigate this maze, even if it meant bending morality to survive. I looked at the children, then back at the figure. I will do whatever it takes, I said firmly. And I will not fail. The shadowed figure nodded, and for the first time, I sensed acknowledgement, not agreement, not trust, but recognition of capability. The older children shifted slightly, their posture tentative but watchful. Every second stretched, each one loaded with consequence. Then, from deeper in the room, another sound, a soft shuffle, deliberate, echoed. Something moved in the farthest corner, slower than a human pace should allow. I froze, realizing that even with the rules laid bare, even with leverage in my hands, danger still lurked, waiting for the smallest mistake. I pressed a hand to the worn floor, grounding myself. My mind raced. Confrontation, negotiation, deception, survival. Protecting the children, controlling Dan, understanding the network, surviving the shadowed figure, it all converged on a single point. The next move. I took a deliberate step forward, eyes fixed on the far corner, the older children, and the shadowed figure alike. Every instinct, every calculation, every ounce of cunning would be tested in the next moment. And then I saw it, a movement, subtle, deliberate, signaling the arrival of someone or something more dangerous than anyone I had faced so far. Who or what emerges from the shadows, and will her tactical, moral, and psychological control be enough to protect the children and survive this next revelation? The subtle movement from the far corner coalesced into a tall, imposing figure. Unlike the shadowed men above or the tall guide who had led me here, this presence radiated control, danger, and an uncanny patience. Every inch of the room seemed to bend to its awareness. I could feel it before I saw it fully, a predator, calculating, assessing, waiting for the first misstep. The older children stiffened. The younger ones behind me pressed closer, their trust absolute and terrifying. One wrong move, one hesitation, and all of them could be harmed. I forced my breath to steady, channeling fear into cold focus. Panic would kill us. Control was survival. You've come far, the figure said, voice low, deliberate. But this is where choices matter. Not hesitation, not negotiation. Action. I met its gaze steadily. I've already made choices. I will make more, and I will protect these children, no matter the cost. A faint ripple passed through the older children, a mix of fear and tentative recognition. They had learned to read power in silence, and they saw it now. I was no longer a passive participant. I was the center of the room's tension. The figure stepped forward, deliberate. Every motion measured. Your husband was careless. The network below is fragile, but resilient. One wrong decision could unravel everything. Tell me, are you willing to cross lines? I swallowed, pulse hammering. Lines. Morality. Survival. Everything blurred. Protect the children. Leverage. Power truth. Deception. Every instinct screamed the same thing. Control the chaos, or it will control you. I will do what is necessary, I said, voice calm, but every syllable carried steel. Even if it means bending rules, breaking trust, or manipulating truths. But no child will be harmed. The figure paused, studying me. Its presence was a test, a pressure gauge for cunning and resolve. Then, almost imperceptibly, it nodded. Then choose carefully. Your next move determines not just their safety, but yours and the fragile web your husband has undone. I glanced at Dan, pale and trembling, the weight of guilt pressing down. His lies had led us here, but I realized now that he was powerless. I would have to navigate this labyrinth without him. I stepped toward the trapdoor, toward the far corner where the newest threat lingered. Every shadow, every glance, every subtle motion mattered. I had learned to read patterns, anticipate reactions, and bend situations to my advantage. But this was beyond strategy. This was moral navigation under pressure, raw instinct sharpened by fear and calculation. A low, deliberate shuffle echoed from the corner. I forced myself to exhale slowly, deliberately. One step forward. Eyes fixed. Hands visible but ready. mind racing. Every ounce of cunning focused on controlling the room, protecting the children, and surviving this reckoning. The figure took another step, closing the distance, but still measured, testing me. Then, faintly, a nod, a gesture acknowledging my grasp of control. Not agreement, not trust, but recognition. And then the sound came. A sudden, soft scrape from the corridor below, like metal against concrete. Not human. Or at least, not someone or something I could read fully. My pulse surged. The stakes just doubled. Every choice from here forward carried exponential risk. I pressed my hand to the trapdoor, feeling the worn wood beneath my fingers. The children huddled behind me, watching, silent, wide-eyed. My gaze swept the room. Dan, pale, broken. The shadowed men, tense. The older children, wary. The hidden figure, patient and deadly. And I knew, in that instant, that the next move would define everything. Survival, morality, power control, trust, betrayal. I exhaled slowly, muscles taut. My hand hovered over the floor, mind racing. Then I stepped forward. Who or what is making the scrape below? And will her strategic and moral choices be enough to survive this final confrontation and protect the children? The scrape from the corridor below had grown louder, deliberate, echoing through the basement like a heartbeat of danger. My hand pressed against the worn wood of the trapdoor, the cool surface grounding me as adrenaline sharpened every sense. The children clung to me, silent, tense, their trust raw and fragile. One wrong move, one hesitation, and everything could unravel. The figure from the shadows stepped forward, imposing, patient, eyes locked on mine. "The final choice is yours," it said. "One wrong decision, and the consequences are irreversible." I swallowed, the weight of the basement pressing down. Dan, pale and trembling, could no longer influence the situation. He was powerless, a witness to the consequences of his lies. The shadowed men above were tense but held back, silent participants. The older children watched me, wary but attentive. The scraping grew sharper, closer. I realized it was deliberate, almost calculated, as if whatever waited below was testing my resolve. My mind raced. Confront it directly, attempt negotiation, or use leverage to assert control. Each option carried risk. Each could cost lives. I took a deep breath. Fear surged, but it was tempered by calculation. Protecting the children came first. Control came second. Everything else followed. "Step aside," I said to Dan, voice calm, firm. He hesitated, then nodded, understanding that his time for influence had ended. I gestured for the shadowed men to hold, focusing every ounce of my attention on the corridor below. The scrape stopped. Silence fell, dense and suffocating. Then, from the darkness, a shape emerged. A young man, older than any of the children, his body tense, eyes sharp, alert. He froze at the sight of me, then spoke, voice low. "I won't let them hurt you or the others. But this house, this is dangerous. You have to decide fast." I swallowed, adrenaline coiling like a spring. Every calculation, every instinct, every lesson from the past hours had led to this moment. My next move would determine survival, justice, and the unraveling of the web Dan had spun. I stepped fully into the corridor, hands open, calm, deliberate. "Everyone stays where they are," I said. "No one moves without my instruction. Do you understand?" The young man nodded, slowly. I felt the tension shift slightly, the first real acknowledgement of authority I'd exerted. Fear was still present, but now it was balanced by control. The tall shadowed figure watched silently, assessing. I understood then. Cunning and decisiveness were the only tools left. Morality had to bend, but never break entirely. Protecting the children required ruthless calculation. I glanced at Dan. His face was pale, guilt etched deep. Then back at the children, older and younger alike. I realized the truth. Leadership in this basement wasn't about power over others. It was about responsibility. I took another deliberate step. "We are leaving this basement. Everyone. Slowly. Carefully. No sudden moves. We exit together." The shadowed figure's eyes flicked to the trapdoor, then to the corridor beyond. There was a long pause, as if weighing the risk, testing my resolve. Then, imperceptibly, it nodded. The unspoken acknowledgement was clear. My strategic choice had passed the test. I led the way, descending fully into the corridor, hands visible, voice calm but commanding. The older children flanked the sides, tense but obedient. The younger one stayed close behind, clutching my coat, trusting me utterly. The shadowed figure followed at a measured distance, silent but watchful. As we neared the basement exit, the scraping sound returned, faint but deliberate. My pulse surged, muscles tensed. I stopped, assessing. From the shadows emerged a final figure. A child, older, wary, holding a makeshift weapon. Fear glimmered in their eyes, but so did recognition, an understanding that survival depended on careful obedience. I exhaled slowly, keeping my tone firm but gentle. "No one gets hurt," I said. "If you stay calm and follow me, everyone survives." The child hesitated, then slowly lowered the weapon. I felt a flicker of triumph, a small victory earned by calculation, patience, and moral courage. One step at a time, we moved toward the stairs, toward the light above. Every second was measured, every gesture deliberate. The basement, once a symbol of betrayal, secrecy, and fear, became a test of cunning, moral clarity, and ruthlessness tempered with protection. Finally, we reached the top. The front door loomed ahead, sunlight spilling in, washing over the children's faces. They were exhausted, terrified, but alive. And I realized, with a hard clarity, that survival had required everything: courage, calculation, ruthlessness, and an unflinching moral compass. I glanced back at Dan. His lies, his deception, had brought us here. But it was my choices, my cunning, my strategy, that had kept us alive. He would answer for what he had done, but the children's safety came first. I stepped outside, feeling the sunlight on my face, the cool air filling my lungs. The children followed, hesitant but trusting. Behind us, the basement door remained closed, a secret buried, a web of lies disrupted. And for the first time, I allowed myself a flicker of relief, knowing that the choices I had made, calculated, ruthless, morally complex, had saved them. But the memory of the shadows, the scraping, the weight of deceit lingered. Because in this house, secrets may be buried, but shadows always wait. The children are safe, the husband's deception exposed, and the network disrupted. But the psychological and moral consequences of her choices remain, leaving her changed forever.